XDTLA, what's the difference between high level play and top level play? Top level play is more like consistency and just more understanding all the situations, and also goes a lot beyond what's the game. A lot of the times the people who are in high level play understand everything about the game, but they're just bad at the, I guess, meta game, you want to call it, the game outside the game. Like top level play is more about, understanding how to play in tournaments, how to, really read people, and under and like really studying the other players, right? Like, I mean, we could talk a little bit about this here, but when Nephew qualified, right, he said that Punk was texting him the entire time. But when Nephew said that during his winning speech, he said Punk was texting me how to beat this person. He was like, what their tendencies are. And that is really interesting because it's at that point in time, it's almost like less about the matchup and more about the human at that point, right? So that's a big deal at that point. So when you get to the top level play, when you are a Mana RD or a Nephew or a Punk or an Itazan or a Tokido or a Daigo, etc., it starts to become even more than just about what the game is. It's actually just like it's starting to understand, like I've talked about tournaments before. When you actually play in tournaments, there's so much more than just the game. Some people have different habits about when to eat, when not to eat, biding your time, maintaining energy, playing nerves on stage with people watching in crowds, and etc. Once you're actually a top level player and you're playing in these environments and tournaments and stuff like that, it's a completely different thing. You are in a different world. So much to the point, again, RIP Flo, bless Flo, and again, we miss you so much, Flo. He was the best player I've ever seen outside of tournaments, right? Like, he kept up with Justin Wong in every single game. He's the only person I've ever seen actually kind of get Justin a little tilted. It's kind of crazy. And he was amazing, but he couldn't play in tournaments. He got very self-conscious. He's thinking about the lights and the moments and stuff like that. There's just a lot of different factors at that point, which is why I've often said that when a player wins their first tournament, it almost kind of snaps something. Like, you'll see a player who's just like always a gatekeeper, like, oh, just outside of top eight, just inside top eight, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But he can never quite make it. Then they win one big tournament and all of a sudden they're always a threat. Like what happened, right? But it's just because, like, when you win a tournament, your mind just changes. Like, the brain chemistry changes. Like, now you're in a tournament, you're like, I've done this before, I've succeeded, I totally can do this. And all of a sudden, the consistency hits. It's weird how often that actually happens with a lot of players. They win their first big tournament, and then all of a sudden, they're just super consistent from that point forward. So honestly, the difference between a high level competitor and a top level competitor is a lot of the outside factors, right? Including things like knowing how to train better, right? I mean, Sonic Fox has often said that, they don't need to train as much as everybody else because they train smarter than a lot of other people, right? They just basically say they know how to train, they know how to lab better than other people know how to lab. And so they can recognize what's good. They can recognize, what they need to figure out. They understand what's a legit mix-up, etc., etc. So that makes them a stronger player in a lot of ways. So yeah, again, the high level versus the top players, it's not like some sort of magic like fighting game formula, right? It's consistency. It's knowing how to not buckle under pressure. It's learning how to control your emotions a lot better. the clutch factor, et cetera, et cetera. The little things like I've said before, like if you can beat your opponent with only 60% of your tricks, beat them with 60%. Don't use the stuff later on because you can save those for later on if you need to, et cetera, et cetera. And really, psychology. Psychology is a lot of it too, is that you really start understanding how the other player is panicking and stuff like that. One of the things that I've always hated the most is chat or commentary or anybody being like, oh, he's going to uppercut this time. The guy wakes up and uppercut and you be like, yo, I was right. I would have been right. I would have been right. No, you wouldn't have been right, because if the person was playing against you, they would know the kind of person you are and they'd probably get that you're expecting an uppercut, so they wouldn't do it. Right, so it's not a vacuum like that. It's literally not a vacuum. It's literally that guy is playing against your brain, and on that match they were playing against that brain. So yes, they're gonna DP because they read the other guy is too aggressive, or they realize they're in desperation mode. But if they're fighting against you, they would be like, oh, he's not he doesn't have that history of desperation mode or whatever, you know what I mean? So a lot of it, when you get to top levels, like I said, when Punk was texting Nephew, he was texting him tendencies of the players to help Nephew, not like, hey, in this matchup, be wary. I mean, at least that's what Nephew implied. So I would love to talk to Nephew about that a little bit in more detail. I think that would be really, really cool. So oh, Gundam Juhurikai, that's what this topic is all about. That's what this topic is all about. So yeah, that's basically what it is. Gundam Juhurikai says, I can't play in tournaments. I did fine in my GBFS Evo pool, but when I was told I was losers finals for my pool, my brain just shut down. Yes, again, a lot of the times the difference between a top level player and a high level player is just, can you manage the environment? Can you play in a place that you're not used to? Can you not suppress your nerves, but channel the nerves in a way that is successful for you? Because a lot of the times when people have trouble and they get nervous, it affects the way they play. The top players out there, they get nervous too. Trust me, there's nothing about them being top players that makes it so they don't get nervous. They're absolutely getting nervous. However, they know how to channel that into more adrenaline, into quicker reactions, or just, not, like I said, they don't remove it, but they can just kind of like push it down a little bit and play. And then after the thing, I mean, I remember at some of the height of my quality of play, like way back in the B5 days, I remember playing somebody at B4 or B5. I can't remember, but it was CVS 1. And we were playing, and it was a super close match. I ended up winning the match afterwards. And, obviously I was super nervous and just like tense and all this stuff, because it was really far in the bracket. It was really, really far in the bracket. And I ended up beating my opponent. And as soon as I beat him, we shook hands, we talked a little bit. But as soon as I walked away from the cabinet, I like almost fell to the floor. Like I was dizzy all of a sudden, because I would like, I just had all, and again, I'm a very emotional person. So emotion just kind of comes, like, it's hard for me to suppress my emotion. And so I did such a good job, and I clutched out that match so well. And then as soon as it was done, like, I couldn't walk. I literally just like fell to the floor and just like sat down next to a cabinet. And my friends were like, are you okay? And I was like, my head is winded. Like, I'm super dizzy. Like, I think all this blood rushed to my head and stuff. But like, it didn't happen to me during the match, but it happened to me after the match. And that's just because a lot of people are, when you play the game, you're able to kind of suppress that kind of thing. You're able to hold it back. And a lot of times when I used to do poorly in tournaments and stuff, there's a lot of times when my emotions would get the best of me. Like, it's weird. I've told this story before, but like, if I am fighting somebody and their friends are rooting for them, I play really badly because I kind of like empathize with this dude's friends, and I'm like, I should give him some happy, like, so I don't even play as good. Like, when people root for me, then I get really nervous because I'm like, great, now if I lose, I disappoint somebody else, not just me. So, like, I've literally told somebody before, I was like, don't root for me. Don't root for me. I'm sorry. I get it. You're cool, but don't root for me. you know, um, it's crazy. It's really really tough. I have several. Wait, let me see. Hang on a second. A lot of people are talking over here. What are we saying over here? I was literally shaking at my SF6 pools at Evo. Yes, it's terrifying, dude. It's scary, dude. Could that be considered cheating? Like how there was a big deal about coaches in Tekken not so long ago? Yeah, it can definitely be considered cheating, but it might not be. I mean, like I said, it just depends on how you want to look at it, right? So if Punk was texting nephew, I mean, again, we don't have any really rules established about that, so we can't really do anything right now, right? Like, the way that you would prevent that is that players who jump up to stage have to turn in their phones, right? Or just put their phones where the tournament TO can see it, and they're not allowed to touch their phones for the entire match, right? That's how you implement something like that, but that's not implemented, so it's not cheating because nobody has said no so far. Nobody's made a rule for it yet. So I have several musicians in my family, and the one thing I keep hearing is if you stop being nervous before performing, it's time to quit. It probably means you stopped caring. Yes, 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 yes. Great, great quote right there, Petty. I remember early in Street Fighter V at Evo, Justin and Daigo had to play each other at an Evo, and Justin won. And I talked to Justin afterwards. He was like, God, I was nervous as hell, dude. I was like, dang, really? That's actually kind of crazy, you know? You're like, wait, you've done this so many times, blah, 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 blah. That's why when we watch high-level championships from the comfort of our homes, every drive impact is reactable, every jump can be punished with anti-airs. But could you do that there in the heat of a high-caliber championship? Exactly, Sinner X. And, when I commentate, I try very hard to put myself in the mindset of one of the players. Sometimes I mess up because I focus on one player too much, and it sounds like my commentary is biased towards them because I'll be like, "Oh my God, oh no, he got hit." It's just like, and then when he hits, oh, he got the hit, right? And the other player, you're like, the fans of the other player are like, what the fuck, man? Like, why aren't you rooting for this guy? And so, like, I'll have to catch myself and change it. But the reason why you do that, the reason why you put yourself in that mindset is because I intentionally try to think like the player is. So if I get caught off guard by a jump in and so do they, then I'm like, oh, they just weren't ready. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to be like, where's your anti-air? My God, that jump was so obvious. I try not to do that. I try to keep my brain very much in line with what the players are thinking so that, I never want to come off. And it's weird because, like, some people have said, like, oh, you're supposed to be the smart one if you're the commentator, blah, blah, blah. But I never want to be the know-it-all commentator, right? I always want to be the commentator who's surprised and who's excited by cool shit. You know what I mean? Because I just think that's fun. So, yeah. It was MVC3 that he won that tournament, that he barrel rolled. He jumped up and went to pop off, and his legs died under him for a couple of seconds. Yeah, and same thing with Yipes. When he cheered when he won MVC2, he jumped up and he sprained his ankle when he came down. It's tough out there, man. So sometimes not caring about a match can improve your performance. It's true. A lot of times where you're like, well, I just whatever. But I mean, talking about mental states and stuff like that, the year that John Choi won 2 Street Fighter games, when he won CVS2 and Super Turbo, he beat Nuki, and in CVS2, he beat Boss, like 2 championship players of those games, right? Nuki was already like a champion of ST, and Boss is, of course, one of the greatest CVS2 players ever. And John Choi beat them both. That was the year that his father was in the hospital and was basically, dying. And John, talked to his dad. He's like, I'm not going to Evo. I'm going to stay here with you. And his dad literally was like, this means a lot to you. Go to Evo and play. go to Evo and play because this is what you do. This is your thing. This is where this is your world essentially. It's like don't sacrifice that for me kind of a situation, which is crazy. And Choi said like when he played uh during that tournament, it was like a clarity. You know what I mean? Like he just had a clarity. He just had like a sense of calm. That he never really had at an event like that before. And then fighting for his father, thinking about his dad the entire time is one of the things that really just kind of allowed him to win, honestly. So a lot of the times mental state is a huge factor, a huge factor when it comes to fighting games, man.
It was Tuesday,